So what I'm going to show you guys how to do is this, what it's called to be a spirit rattle. So this looks like a solid ball. Basically, it's two hollow forms that are made out of what are considered to be pinch pots. Have any of you guys ever made a pinch pot before? Okay.
I'm very shaky.
So a pinch pot is basically a way of being able to take a lump of clay and using just your hands and using your fingers to actually make the form hollow. If you do two pieces of clay, they're identical in size and do the exact same steps, it'll make it so that you can actually repeat it and have it so that you can...
Please hold this.
All right, you guys are being a little distracted.
I'm sorry.
So that it'll make it so that you can actually go through and have two pieces of the same size so you can put them together to make the hollow form. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a piece of clay that's about the size of what I'm taking off from up here. And then you need to divide it into two separate halves. The thing is though, they need to be fairly consistent in size. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to make it into large meatball size shapes. A little bigger than a golf ball, not quite as big as a racquetball, if you know what that is, for doing this. If you get them too much larger than this, your form will get really big, and if you haven't handled larger amounts of clay, it can be harder to be able to control it if you get too much out. So for this first project, we're definitely going to go through and try to make them so they're like large meatballs. I like to have meatballs about that size. Yeah, most places don't give them to you that big anymore.
Grandma makes them that big.
Yeah. I went to Carrabba's here and it wasn't very big either. I was disappointed.
Carrabba's is kind of eh.
My grandmother's house.
They're expensive for too.
Yeah.
I'm starting to figure that out with some of the restaurants around here. Some of the restaurants around here, you can spend a lot of money and you get a lot of food, and other ones you spend a lot of money and you get not a lot of good food either.
See, if you go, the closer you get to downtown, the better the food gets.
It can be.
For the most part.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
So see how these are really similar in size. This is what we need. So now we need to go through and actually make these hollow. In order to do that, I'm going to use my thumb. I'm going to push it down in the clay. I don't want to go all the way through. So when I'm pushing my thumb down in the clay, I want to stop with about this much thickness in the clay in the wall. So it's about 3/8 an inch. When we're working on the potter's wheel, it'll be exactly the same way that we actually make the bottom interiors, so everything is made the proper thickness so things go through the firing better. The more consistent something is, the more improved quality for your final product and for it going through the firings without having as many weird things happen. If things are too thick and they're put in the kiln and things are not dry, they will explode. So we want to try to pay attention to thickness as much as possible. If things are totally dry, you can fire things solid like bricks, but the problem with that, they have to be fired an extremely long time, extremely slowly. So like for a brick kiln, they have them set up so it's like a train where it gets pulled through, where the floor moves through, but that it takes over a week for it to heat up and cool all the way down, so like 7 days. So that our kilns here are only made to go for like a day. So anything that's extremely thick, we're not really set up here to be able to fire. Does that make sense? All right. That's part of the reason why I went through all that other stuff from before with all the vocabulary, so that when I say stuff now, you guys kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about. So hopefully that's helped. All right, at this point though, I'm going to take my thumb, and like I said, for that thickness, I'm going to push down into the clay, and I'm going to stop short of going all the way through. So if I think I'm getting close, I'll take my finger and thumb and kind of pinch around in a circle and start to feel what the thickness is for what I have going on. So this is how it starts. Okay? So now the idea and concept is very similar to the potter's wheel. I want to try to thin this out. In order to do that though, I'm going to use my finger and thumb all the way at the bottom. I'm going to support the clay with my left hand. If you're left-handed, it'd be just in reverse, but I actually use either hand to do this while I'm doing the process. So I'm going to start from pinching from the bottom and slowly work my way up to the top. I'm kind of thinking the same way as the potter's wheel. So I'm doing it and doing it evenly and under control. If this top starts to crack like this, I want to get this early on. I want to work the clay back and forth. You can use something like a needle tool or the pointed wood stick it's still laying here, or a pencil to basically work this back together so that you can make sure that you can get your piece through the process without it cracking. It'd be smart to add a little bit of slip, but somebody stole my brush. There it is. It's on the table. So to work that back together from where that was cracking so that that doesn't come apart. So like with that, hopefully you can tell now that I got it put back together. So now I'm going to go back to pinching,
Yeah.
finger and thumb on the outside, supporting it with my left hand, starting from the bottom, working my way up to the top, pinching in a circular motion, trying to make it even. So if it works out right, you can start to end up with a form where it's starting to thin out. The thickness of the walls, again, I'm trying to make close to the thickness of the needle tool thickness for 3/8 of an inch. So I want to do that from the bottom all the way up to the top. So we're going to do 3 of these. We're going to do one where we're going to try to make it as smooth and round as perfect as possible, like this guy is heading that direction. We're going to do one where you're going to actually add things to the surface. I'm going to make one of these into a moon head. So I'll be able to show that tomorrow afternoon, hopefully, if I can work on it some tomorrow morning. And then we're going to do another one where we're going to make it a little thicker. And I'm doing the one that's a little thicker right now that we'll carve away at. So this one, I'm not going to get the walls quite as thin as what I could. It's going to be a little thicker than the needle tool, but I'm going to leave a little bit of meat there to be able to carve away at it. So this is how I'm going to start the first half. I'm going to do the same thing with the second half. We are going to add clay beads to the inside of this to make it so that it rattles. So you can either use your right or left hand to do this process. It's that same idea for supporting it and just turning it. So if your hand gets tired, you can switch back and forth to make it so that you can get through the project. So if I do the same steps and I repeat the same steps, I'll make it so that it's even. All right. Just keep pinching. So at this point, if I compare it to the other one, it's getting close in size. You can tell I need to pinch it out more so it'll thin out and open up a little bit more. So I'll thin the walls a little bit more, and it should be about the same size in diameter. Diameter is what it is for the distance around the outside. Make it so that it's hopefully close enough so I can get it put together. So that and that together, I think I can get those joined together. So inside of there then, to make it so it rattles, can you hand me that little piece of paper? If I make clay beads and I put it directly in there, when I slip and score the edges together, some of the slip might get inside, which would make these stick to the interior. So if I use paper and wrap them in paper and put them inside of here, then when the paper is fired, it'll burn, and it'll make for sure that this clay bead is not stuck to the inside. So it'll make it so it'll rattle later on. So this is a way to be able to make a clay rattle. I'm gonna take a little bit of this paper, wrap that up. There's 2 beads that I'm making.
Please release 11th grade girls to room 103 computer lab if they are interested in trying out for today's show. Thank you.
Anybody that's doing that? Okay, so then I'll just make 2. I'm not gonna waste your time. If you wanna make them and have them rattle a lot, you can make up to like 4 or 5 in it. We're just doing 2 for demonstration purposes. So now I'm gonna go through and add water to the top edge. So if I add water to the clay, what is this going to turn into if I let it set for a couple minutes?
Slip.
Slip. So that we don't have formal slip made right now. This is a way to be able to force this and make it so that I have a way of making slip directly where I need it to be. So I'll do this first one and get it wet like this. I didn't get the whole thing wet, just trying to get the edge. I'm gonna do the same thing to this other part. And while, well, I guess we need to answer the phone. Yes. Yes. No problem.
Can I go to the restroom?
If you want to, that's fine. I'm gonna finish doing the demonstration. Let's
Oh,
give it-
sorry.
You guys realize we can go around that way. I made another path. There's 2 ways to get out of here. All right. Okay, so I'm back. So hopefully while I've been gone and holding this, that it's turned into slip. So I'm going to take this. I'll test it with my finger. Yes, it's making slip. You can see on the tip of my finger. I now need to score this and mix that in. So this is the process of slipping and scoring. If you bring in a fork, a plastic fork, you make 4 lines at one time instead of 1. It's a little faster. So I could be using a fork, which would be quick. I'm just glad that this isn't a big piece. When I do big things, sometimes I use better planning for tools. Okay, so that is scored. So now I need to do the same thing to the other piece. And then I'll work on joining them together and show you the process. If you're able to get a hold of a spoon, it wasn't on the list of things, this will make it really easy for doing your burnishing. This is the ideal thing for doing the burnishing on the surface and for helping to round your forms out when we're doing these. So if you scrape it with a spoon, it actually works really, really well. All right, that works. Okay, so now I need to take the 2 halves and carefully set the one on the other and get the edges lined up. So like with this, I'm going to carefully start to push them together, and it should look a little bit like kind of like a lumpy potato. So like this. So I want to try to get those sealed together. I don't want to be very rough with it right now. If I'm too rough with it right now, it'll collapse. So I have it joined together like that at this point. Now basically with the skin of this, to get this to connect together, anything that's higher on one side, I'm going to pull it across to the other side. So it's going to kind of work to help stitch this together. So I'm going to pay attention to what is higher and what's lower as I do this to get it started. And it'll help to get the 2 halves put together. So that's how this one started. I don't know if you can tell the difference after working with it. This one here, I'll pass it around. It's starting to dry out. You can tell that it's starting to hold its structure a little bit. This is the one from last period. You can tell it's a lot softer. So please don't crush them. I'm letting you guys get a chance to feel to see what they're like versus one versus the other. That one's a lot softer. You can tell it doesn't feel the same. If you guys notice that that one's starting not to feel sticky, where these still feel a little sticky. The plastic clay is definitely to the point where it has so much moisture that it has a little bit of
A stick.
stickiness to it. Okay. So now I have it this far along, so basically I have made a potato. And I need to try to start to work the seam and get it to the point where it's smoothed out, and then I need to start to get rid of the lumps and bumps. All right, so I'm going to use the spoon. This is what I was talking about. This works really, really well for joining halves together and starting to round it. How many minutes are we at it in the video?
14.
Okay. Well, if I'm almost done with this. So now from there, after I scrape it, I need to use my thumb to rub across the surface to get rid of anything that's sticking up. And then I can start to take my finger and start to tap down on the surface to start to change the shape. So this is what we're going to be executing today with the first one that you guys want to do, that we're going to do one perfectly round, perfectly smooth, one where it's additive, where you're going to add things to the surface, and one where you're going to go through and actually carve away at the surface, subtractive. So that's pretty much the ways that you can form with clay. Okay, you can stop it.